Welcome on inside the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. My name is David Brickley. I am your host, and every single show we keep you up to speed on the ever-changing digital social marketing landscape by bringing on some friends and colleagues and experts in the space. And this is going to be no different. Episode number 38. We have deemed this episode the Curt Schilling episode. Will, what do you think of when you think of the name Curt Schilling? It's funny you say that. I think bloody sock as well. What a monumental moment in Curt Schilling's career, and it sticks with him. So we'll call this a Curt Schilling podcast. Good friend of mine. I'm really excited to talk shop with him. I really don't have a lot of notes here. I'm just going to go off the top because he's so easy to talk to. But Dave Sethi, he is the head of sports at Instagram. He's had a really impressive career. We've actually first met back in 2011. STN Digital as an agency started off as a YouTube channel called STN TV. It was a talking head, kind of a first take type of, radio show, essentially on YouTube. And we were kind of one of the first people out there creating original sports content on YouTube. So YouTube liked the sound of that. Dave was pretty much our partnership manager, and he was so cool. He was able to get us on the front page of YouTube. He just hooked it up and did some amazing things, really just out of the kindness, and always he was a busy man, but always returned phone calls and emails. Anyways, he went from YouTube. After he went from Google, went to YouTube. Then he spent some time at Whistle Sports as head of partnerships and operations over there. Then he became the chief of staff at Complex for a couple of years, and now the head of sports. So the guy knows sports. He knows digital. He's seen this entire game. And you guys are really going to like this. I mean, the number one thing we talk about on the show, I think, is Instagram and how it's just far and above the king of social right now. I asked time and time again, over the last 37 episodes, Will, what is the number one platform that seems to be working for your business right now? And about 95% of the time we hear Instagram. So I know a lot of people are going to be, turning up their headphones or turning up their car stereo and making sure they listen to this one, because we're really going to get into the granular aspect of Instagram. And I'm going to tell them, why did you guys go landscape on IGTV? I feel like, I don't know, I love vertical so much. I felt like they should have held their ground. So I'm going to ask them that question and get super inside baseball when it comes to Instagram and everything they're doing on not only the sports side, but macro at Instagram as well. You guys are going to love this one. Dave Sethi, the head of sports at Instagram. All right, I am pleased and honored to be joined by my man, my friend Dave Sethi. He's head of sports at Instagram. Dave, how are we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
So good to see you once again. And I think by the time this show gets released, we'll already have been at ProMax doing a panel together. So it's so great to kind of talk shop with you as we always do. But I always kick things off with a random question. So as a proud Notre Dame alum, when you saw your boy Brady Quinn jack up 24 reps at 225, at that moment, did you think this guy's an absolute stud with a great NFL career ahead of him, or were you potentially predicting 12 TDs and 17 INTs in 8 NFL seasons?
Wow, throw me a curveball up front. So
warm me up here.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, Brady Quinn and I were in the same dorm in college at Notre Dame, and one of my college roommates was a tight end at ND, and so my last day on campus at Notre Dame was actually in the weight room with Brady Quinn, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought he was gonna be a stud. And then you realize that there are guys who are products of a system, and I should have known. I should have known better watching all those Florida, quarterbacks that played under Spurrier should have taught me better. But I actually think if he had landed in a better landing spot, he might have had a more substantial career. But hats off to him for having a tremendously successful post-career in media. Yeah. I think he's a phenomenal commentator. So, would have liked to seen him on the field for a few years longer, but he's doing a great job in the booth.
Well, yeah, to your point, before Baker, I mean, the joke was Cleveland is where quarterbacks go to die. I mean, there was a stretch there where they were getting number one draft picks for a decade and just could not figure it out. It was pretty sad, actually. Literally, if you got picked number one and you were so good to get picked number one, your career may be over type deal.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the state of Cleveland or the state of Ohio, rather. I mean, I remember Achilles Smith going to Cincinnati and his career quickly dying.
That's right.
And our boy Tim Couch, who was probably the first in that long line of quarterbacks who had no success at all in Cleveland. But yeah, Baker seems to be turning the corner. So.
I want to dig into. I mean, listen, you and I go way back. I was looking back at 8, 9 years almost. Yeah. It's funny, STN as an agency started off as a YouTube channel essentially, and you were my rep at YouTube, and you were so kind to hook it up, help me hook up, get us on the front page and things like that, which I'm forever grateful for. But you've had a really impressive career, starting at Google, then moving over to YouTube, Whistle Sports, then you go to chief of staff at Complex, and then most recently, becoming the head of sports at Instagram. Can you break down, I think, first and foremost, your role and what you oversee day to day at Instagram?
Yeah, for sure. And so I think I'll sort of break it down in three ways. If my overarching goal as head of sports at Instagram is to have great sports content on our platform and highlight that we have great content on our platform, I think there are three ways I can be impactful there. One is I can shout it from the rooftops. I can jump on the Business of Social podcast. I can speak at Promax. I can work with marketing and comms to illustrate the great partner content that we have on our platform that really extends from athlete-driven, authentic, first-person content all the way to the most premium sports content and highlights that you can find in sports overall. So I can do that to be influential in this role. The second is I can be a strategist with our partners. And by partners, I really am talking about the folks we work with in the athlete segment, our media partners, the ESPNs, the Bleachers of the world, teams and leagues on a global basis. And so how do I strategize with them, help make sense of our ever-evolving industry, how Instagram plays a part in that, and what are the tools, the strategies on our platform that are going to help them really be successful in engaging what I would say is their current but also next generation of sports fans, of whom there are 320 million sports fans on Instagram. So strategizing with them and really being that sort of consultative guide and lens of which we can be helpful to their business. And then
there's 500 million users on Instagram, so 220 of them are sports fans?
Sorry, so there's over 1 billion users on Instagram.
1 billion now.
320 million are sports fans. So that means they follow a number of sports accounts. Absolutely. And again, they're following accounts like House of Highlights, but they're also following accounts like John Wall or Bradley Beal. As you can tell, I'm a Wizards fan, so I follow.
Yeah, very awkward reference there, Bradley Beal.
No, right?
Not LeBron James.
I mean, everybody follows LeBron, so I got to give some love to my Washington athletes. But the third way, and I would argue one of the most challenging yet rewarding parts of my role is how am I an advocate for sports within the walls of Instagram and Facebook Inc. overall? How am I representing the interests, the unique interests, challenges, needs, and opportunities of sports partners in an environment where Instagram is trying to serve a lot of different constituents? We're trying to build for creators and individual creators. We're trying to build for consumers and what their experience looks like. We're trying to build for advertisers. How do I represent the interests of sports, work with product, engineering, my cross-functional partners overall, and really represent how valuable this vertical is to both our fans as well as to the partners themselves, and try to build tools, products in ways in which we can work with sports to make this and continue to make Instagram a great place for sports content in the future.
Well, you were doing some really cool things with original content at Whistle Sports, and then at Complex, I think First We Feast and Sneaker Shopping, all those series kind of released under your tenure as well. Before you got to Instagram, what was the most, appealing thing about Instagram as a platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think one, if you ask a lot of people, both consumers and partners, Instagram is not only at the forefront of, I would say, innovation, but it's definitely where that next generation of sports fans exists. And so for me, being able to actually have my career come a little bit full circle in working at a platform 6 years ago in YouTube, seeing how the industry has evolved, and then being able to come to a platform like Instagram, which has found such great success in both its simplicity, but also the ways in which consumers have really embraced all the tools and features of that platform. Being able to work on that as it becomes even more important to our partners across the ecosystem from a distribution perspective, from a programming perspective, and really thinking through what do young people enjoy and want to see on this platform and from our partners. And that's really one key theme and almost differentiator in terms of working at Instagram that has been pounded into my head and I need to continue focusing on, which is how does Instagram stay relevant to young people? And unfortunately, I'm not that young anymore, so I have to sort of extract myself from what does Dave Sethi enjoy about sports on our platform and really think about it from the perspective of what do teens and young people enjoy
Yeah.
and how can we really double down on that. And in many ways, sort of future-proof Instagram, as platforms continue to come and go and evolve and devolve, how does Instagram continue to stay relevant?
As we look back at history 40 years from now, look at sports and social and digital and Instagram and all these different movements, I would assume Bleacher Report and House of Highlights has a chapter in there because I think, in my opinion, House of Highlights pretty much disrupted, ruined, whatever you want to call it, the Sports Center model. I mean, you and I know growing up being huge sports geeks, like ESPN News is on constantly. I couldn't wait for the 11 p.m. news so I can get my Laker highlights or updates on what have you. It kind of started with Vine originally, but once Instagram became that platform, I mean, that really changed the sports landscape in a big, big way.
Absolutely. And people want content when they want it, how they want it. And there is an element of sort of fishing where the fish are. And, to be honest, 8 years ago, the lack of embrace of the distributed media model was rampant. And, the realization is that the audience would rather spend their time in a handful of places. And if you're not relevant in those places, your business stands to be diminished. I look at a House of Highlights. Well, one, I think House of Highlights and just Bleacher Report in general are incredibly innovative. The thing about House of Highlights that I've always found fascinating is that their playbook is differentiated in certain degrees, but you and I can both recall back in 2015, 16, there were a lot of channels across a lot of platforms that were posting highlight-driven content that they did not own. And House of Highlights was running a similar play, but one, they picked the right platform, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They picked the right partner in Bleacher.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one thing that I will...
And Turner, which is, an NBA partner. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing I give them so much credit for, in addition to having vision about like how they wanted to differentiate, it is that they knew and they know how to speak to young people. There is a language, there is a way in which they engage that is so different than literally the same piece of content on a different different channel or different account. And to see what they've done in taking their ability to speak authentically, incredibly to young people and build a robust business around it, and, engage in original content far beyond just highlight-driven content. It speaks to not only them sort of having that foresight, but it speaks to Omar and the team they've built around understanding and even being a part of that group of young people.
But, and you know this because you studied this whole sports digital game for so long. What's interesting is the model itself isn't that impressive. I mean, it's uploading highlights in real time, but what's so fascinating about it for me is Omar, like in his dorm in Florida or whatever it was just cranking, working 20 hours a day, and he knew that the fan base they wanted more, they wanted it instantaneously, and if somebody would have had that same work ethic or same drive and copied that model, so the model itself wasn't revolutionary. But the work ethic, the grind, and the roll up your sleeves is like really what took it from zero to hero.
Absolutely. And to your point, I think he did pick the right platform and the right format, to your point as well, and understanding what that short snackable content looks like, how to make a highlight more than just a highlight, how to make it a conversation starter. And Omar, it's funny because I obviously follow House of Highlights, and one of the things I really enjoy is how engaged Omar and his team are with the fans directly. There is no substitute for a brand engaging its fans on a direct basis, and making their fans feel like they are part of the conversation, if not steering that conversation. And so, again, I give his team a ton of credit because, to your point, there are elements of differentiation in what he did and what that team has done. There's a lot of similarity to what people did, again, a few years ago. And those organizations had to sell themselves for pennies on the dollar when things like Content ID and tools are being rolled out to shut them down. Omar found very strategic partners, and he had a differentiated voice. And there's a reason that he rose above, and that House of Highlights has risen above and become a core staple
It's such a cool
of
story,
Instagram sports.
and even as of a couple of years ago, he was still the number one person posting and editing, and now they obviously have a little bit of a team there. But yeah, it's such a cool story, and happy for him for all his success. Listen, all of our people that come on this program, I would say 99% of them, I ask them what platform seems to be working the best right now. They say Instagram, and that's no secret to you. Why do you think Instagram is working so well for so many brands, and while other platforms may not be able to be on the same playing field as we sit here in 2019?
Yeah, I think part of it is sort of the beauty of simplicity and the simplicity design, which makes a lot of just inherent sense and engages people in a meaningful way. The overall mission of Instagram is to bring people closer to the things and people that they love, and everything that's built about Instagram drives at that mission. And so you see that in the way content is curated. You see it the way in which the algorithm works to help serve more and relevant content to those people. There is a delicate and fine balance of commerciality plus organic, user-driven content that fans want to experience as well. And so I don't want to say that Instagram is doing so many things better than other platforms, because as a user of all these platforms, I gain a lot of utility from a lot of different platforms. Yeah. And frankly, I'm jealous of other platforms for some of the elements and features they have. I think Snapchat and Twitter have done a great job of serving publishers in ways that I think Instagram actually stands to grow and benefit publishers as well. I just think you've reached a critical mass in Instagram of being relevant to a youth demographic. You've started to play the superpowers of being able to port audience from surface to surface, from feed to stories to IGTV. And you've really done, I think I give the product team so much credit for building native experiences that support the business of Instagram, but most importantly, serve its audience, whether it's shoppable content in ways in which people can engage the shopping tool.
We're going to get to that.
Okay. Yeah. And even getting people into a mid and long form content experience like IGTV. It's that stuff didn't happen overnight, and there's definitely lots of room to grow and to improve, but the proof points are there, and I think Instagram is really prudent about how they go about doing those things.
Well, yeah, and for someone on the other side that's like implementing strategy for my clients, I just say that Instagram, if you only had one platform that you can only focus on all day, every day, it would be Instagram. And the reason I say that is the organic engagement. It's just, as you know more than anybody, I did a quick case study and looked at the NBA. One photo on Facebook compared to the same photo on Instagram got 37 times more organic engagement. So the algorithm is juiced right now, and you're just getting more eyeballs on your content, more engagement, more comments, and more people are seeing your content more than the other platforms, which I think scares a lot of marketers because they're afraid that when the algorithm potentially gets turned down a little bit, that may hurt their strategy. But you're seeing that as well, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I don't have to look very far to our sister platform to understand the ramifications of when things are tweaked and changed, right? And I know that, with the embrace of this distributed media model, are you at the mercy, whether it's a publisher, an influencer, or creator, at the mercy of some of those changes? And I think for us, we're very mindful, and frankly, we have benefited as a platform so much from being able to observe how a platform like Facebook has both flourished in terms of
Facebook was the first A/B test, yeah.
Absolutely. And I was sitting in a product meeting with a dear colleague of mine who used the analogy of having an older sister, and the benefit of having an older sibling is that you get to learn from their mistakes, and you get to learn from the ways in which they've been successful. And so Instagram is much the same, and the audiences aren't 100% similar, and so there are some nuances to be understood. But I think, again, to my comments about all of these platforms serving some unique purpose, there are things that Instagram does really well, but there are also things that YouTube does really well.
Yeah.
You're the second biggest search engine in the world, and they play to their strengths. Instagram has done a good job of playing to its strengths. And again, we've also been able to learn a lot from our brethren across the aisle around what is resonant to the audience, what's resonant to publishers, and then also what may be harmful or challenging to our partners with whom we work every day.
So IGTV has been a huge topic on the program the last few months as well. When it first came out, obviously I was extremely excited. As it rolled out, it seemed like the original business plan or model was to go head to head with YouTube for long form content. It was a little bit clunky from a user friendly standpoint. And then once it became a feature of Instagram and it was in stream and watch more, which it is now, I'm just extremely excited about that opportunity because it seemed like the original goal was to make it two separate platforms almost. But once you guys decided, let's make it an additional huge feature inside the mothership app, if you will, that seemed to change the game. Have you guys seen some incredible engagement or numbers since that change has been made?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the proof points are there. And if you just look at our partners or poll our partners around what they've been able to see, to your point, playing to the strength of having a preview and feed and driving to a mid and long form content experience. It's funny you ask that question because when I speak with partners and have spoken at summits, I'm maybe honest to a brutal fault because I was at Complex when IGTV was launched and working for a media company.
That was a couple months before you started Instagram.
Yeah,
guessing, right?
exactly. Yeah. So I joined Instagram at the end of August, and I think IGTV was launched on June 20th, maybe around late June.
Okay.
And so for me, looking at IGTV, to your point, everybody bullish about the opportunity this represented. I'm sure there was some consternation within the media segment around, okay, well, how do I embrace an emerging distribution platform, but without overextending our core business and our resources that we apply to producing mid and long form content? Because as you recall, IGTV was all about vertical video, and let's be honest, most people don't produce in vertical. For me, what I immediately thought about when I was at Complex and then as I moved to Instagram was, what is the superpower of IGTV and how do we play to the superpower? And for me, the superpower on Instagram in general is, as I said earlier, being able to port audience from surface to surface and deliver really relevant, engaging, authentic content. And at launch, IGTV was not doing that, right? You didn't have this experience of Fox Sports being able to produce a piece of long form content, have it be posted in feed, and drive people to a fully immersive experience once they wanted to engage more deeply. And as we found in February, when we did launch that feature, to me, it was almost like this was a long time coming.
Yeah.
And now we really have served our partners across the ecosystem and playing into a superpower.
And the followers want to see that. The Fox Sports follower, wants to see that 3-minute, World Cup documentary or what have you. It's not as if like IGTV is this messy thing where normal Instagram followers don't like content over 1 minute. Like that's just not, it seems that from a data standpoint, it's not the case. So it's been, I agree. I think it always was a really awesome feature, the same way IG Stories is a really awesome feature of Instagram, rather than a completely separate app kind of going head to head with YouTube.
For sure. And just making sure that all of these services are connected in a deep way so that the user is able to have a bit of a seamless experience, as it were. And also, again, as I think about our partners' superpowers, our partners have built an audience on Instagram. So the area where we should be removing all friction is in getting them to content that they think their audience will enjoy. And they don't want to have to essentially build, if not a new audience, build up an awareness from the ground up the way that an athlete who's on Instagram would find it challenging to start a new YouTube channel, right? I mean, ideally it's go bring your audience from one place to another in a seamless, effective way and have that user enjoy the type of content that lives beyond 1 minute.
The original workaround was cut a minute highlight and then click the link in bio to take you off platform to a YouTube. So I think it just makes so much sense you're now keeping people, time. Have you seen any stats or data on just time spent on platform rise because of that? Because I'm assuming that the click the link in bio has probably dipped a little bit due to partners being able to upload full content.
Yeah, I haven't seen any specific data around that sort of total time spent on our platform, although we do know our audience comes and engages content numerous times a day, which is great because they want to. It speaks to the platform's timeliness and relevance to our audience and to our partners. So I think there are some initial proof points of why that's of how that will continue to be a trend. But as we've discussed previously in offline,
Yep.
Instagram is still invested in building tools that support our partners' businesses, and if those businesses live off of Instagram, that's okay. And if we can still provide a value there as well. But for a mid and long form content experience, we should be able to create a surface that really allows our partners to go down some of those rabbit holes, and not feel like they have to go through any sort of constraint in order to do that. And I think post February, we've really found our stride in that regard. And then as you've seen for the past couple of weeks, the fact that we now support landscape, that's taken friction out of the partner experience in supporting a content format that allows for them to not have to assign such substantial production resources
Yeah.
to get their content onto our platform.
That was another topic on the show too. A lot of people would say, am I going to invest another 2 hours a week or what have you to turn all my landscape content into vertical to leverage IGTV? However, as like a truest, like inside baseball type of guy, I kind of wish you guys would have held your ground. I love the vertical. Like, I feel like I like stuff that makes you like have to work a little bit, like in order to really use the platform the right way, be innovative, and be able to put the work into it. But I mean, at scale, I understand the need for listen. We just paid $500,000 for this 16:9 commercial. Don't make us chop it up and go vertical.
Yeah, it's a great.
Is that a thing? Social media purist? I think I just created a new word.
There you go. You better coin it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
We can use it on Wednesday when we meet as well. For me, it's fascinating because the whole positioning was around vertical video. And to speak plainly, I'm certain that there are people who looked at our now support of the landscape format or horizontal as okay, well, Instagram has now moved away from vertical. And the reality is actually that is not the case. The reality is that you gain enough data and you gain enough content on our platform to understand that there are certain content formats and even verticals that are going to cater to a vertical style, whether it's first person, authentic, like handheld content where you're maximizing the real estate of vertical.
I mean, and you've probably seen the data, but with our clients, and we've tested this out as well, like when you compare 16:9 to vertical, I mean, the stats are through the roof. I mean, it's just gorgeous. It fills up your entire iPhone X, and you're using, to your point, all the real estate. It's the equivalent of widescreen TV compared to 4:3 with black bars on the side.
Sure, totally. Yeah. And again, I would urge the audience of this podcast to really think through what is important to them as they're producing content, whether it's vertical or horizontal, and what is their audience draw. I'll give you a great example. So Manchester United has a series they produce on Instagram that is one of the most popular franchises on IGTV, and it's shot in vertical. They really invested on it. It's been tremendously successful, and it has athletes featured. And I think the first question any partner would ask post landscape support is, okay, should I just shoot everything in horizontal now? I think the real answer is figure out what your audience enjoys and what franchises or content types are better suited for vertical than horizontal. The other side of that coin is you and I as sports fans, and having worked in sports and sports media, highlights probably are better suited for horizontal than vertical. When I watch a highlight in vertical, my first thought, and this is as a fan, this is not me.
The pan and scan approach, I feel you.
Yeah, and you feel like as someone who likes to see the broader pitch, the broader field, what am I missing that's out of screen that doesn't allow me to sort of foresee or predict what's going to happen on a given player highlight? The same way that if I was a beauty or makeup artist, which I'm obviously not, Come on, maybe this vertical format where I can bring my phone close to what I'm illustrating to my audience feels intimate, authentic, and actually does a better job of illustrating what I want to show to my audience than if I were to do it in horizontal. And so that's where I would implore people to think about what makes sense for their audience, and use that as a guide, as opposed to saying, well, now it's just easy for me to not have to cut content in vertical. Well, your audience might actually really enjoy that content in vertical, in which case it just makes sense to optimize for all those things. And, I look at also a company, not to belabor this point, but I look at an organization like Meredith, who was, in my opinion, incredibly innovative in planting a flag in the sand early days IGTV to say, we are going to produce 10 series in vertical for IGTV, and we're going to sell these shows, and
Yeah.
it's going to be great. And they doubled down on that, I think, less than 3 months ago. Now we support landscape. Does that mean they're going to migrate all of their 10 to 30 shows into horizontal? I don't think that's like a 0 to 1. I think there is a lot of consideration that needs to be made, and especially if there are proof points of their audience that their audience enjoys vertically produced content, then maybe that is the best format for that show or for a handful of those shows.
If so, I'm trying to think, I want to word this. From a vertical standpoint, though, I feel like from what I've seen, people enjoy or interact with that content more. What is your feeling? This is getting super granular. What is your feeling on a minute vertical in feed followed by rotate your device once you're in IGTV? Because like Game of Zones is doing that, which it makes total sense because all the CGI, all the animation that goes into that, it's really tough, I'm sure, for them to re-export all that. So that's what they do, and we've tried that a little bit. But any thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, what we're trying to solve for, honestly, from a product perspective, is how do we I don't want to say eliminate those edge cases, but how do we provide an optimal experience across services where our partners don't have to essentially hack their way to success, right? And I think that's one of the reasons.
Make a separate edit just for you type deal. Okay.
Exactly, and I think if you look at, again, with especially digital first media companies, if their model is make once, monetize 2-3 times over, distribute 2-3 times over, what you saw with a lot of media companies was that exact statement of getting the audience to turn their phone. And so some of the greatest innovations on Instagram's platform have come from seeing what users and partners do to hack our platform, right? And so
then in Twitter, people just started coming up with the retweet, just RT, and they came with the retweet button. The users teach you what you need. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I can't speak specifically to that example that you shared, but all I will say is that for those use cases where we know there is either some friction or constraint on the partner side or the consumer side, we want to address those use cases and take that friction out of the process.
So the statement being, or the punchline being, to make the partner export another edit simply because the platform has, like, that's necessarily not what you want them to do. So you're trying to find ways to make that more user-friendly.
Yeah, I think about the IGTV previews and feed example, where as opposed to them creating a separate edit and then redirecting their audience to the profile to click to an immersive IGTV experience, okay.
It's not as clean.
Yeah, how do I take 3 steps out of that process? Think about shopping and checkout. How do we remove consumer friction in that process and allow them to buy directly on our platform, and in an ideal world, actually improve conversion by taking some friction out of that user journey when it comes to purchasing product that our partners want to sell, right? So I think that's maybe a better allusion to the thought process that we have as an organization, but also our product team on what are the things that make the most sense to benefit the user experience, but also the partner experience.
My final statement on this is a 16:9 in feed does not look good in my opinion. You got to go 4:5. You got to go 1-to-1. Anyways.
Well, send me that email in a formal way so I can escalate it to our
Good. I hope, this sounds weird, but as, again, the social purist in me, I hope that I don't see, because a lot of people are, uploading photos in 16:9, and what a difference 4:5 makes in a vertical environment. And it's gorgeous. It really becomes gorgeous with the right, screen that you have. And if 16:9 starts to become more of the norm, I think people started getting away from that. We'll see. I guess we'll see how the user base interacts with that based on the IGTV change.
No, I think there's also just the question of how much real estate do you want in feed and on these services in general, right? And so I think you're going to see the course corrections with producers of content in general as the data avails itself, and also to your point, as their users give feedback on what they don't like about the content they're being served by our partners.
All right, Dave, we're gonna get into shopping. I'm really excited about this. When it first came out, it blew me away. I'm like, this is like Amazon game changer in my opinion, just because you already have people on their app, especially fashion is such a big thing in products overall, the gym culture, everything like that. And the ability, to your point, not only to send them off site, which I know is kind of in beta, but to have it all within the app and kind of take a page at Amazon with like a 2-click experience. I'm going to give you the floor, like break it down, because I think you and I both know the possibilities here.
Yeah, so I'll say a couple of things, and just for clarity for the audience, and I probably should have asked you more questions up front on who the audience is. I don't think it's my mom listening, Monday afternoon at 5:45. But for folks who are listening who want a better understanding of our shopping product, there are really two shopping experiences that can be had on Instagram today. One is our legacy shopping product, as it were, where our partners have the ability to produce shoppable content, upload their product catalog onto Instagram, and then if the consumer wants to make a purchase, they are directed to our partners' their O&Os, and they can make that purchase there.
Yep.
The newly supported use case is Instagram Checkout, which essentially takes
and this is in beta or just top 20 brands or
there are I believe between 20 and 25. I can't remember the exact number. 20 and 25 brands who are currently onboarded onto Checkout. It's a U.S. only feature, so you have to be a consumer based in the U.S. And a partner based in the U.S. in order to enjoy this product. But essentially, for Checkout, we've removed that last layer. The transaction can occur on Instagram, so that all the user has to do is fill in payment information, select that product, and then they can stay on Instagram and move on. And really the best analogy for sort of the long-term thinking of Instagram and shopping is, how has Instagram become your personalized mall? Because different from an Amazon, you are not necessarily going to Instagram with the 100% intent of shopping for a specific product. You are browsing partner content, you are perusing brand content, you're perusing your friends' content, and you are essentially in a shopping mall where there are any number of things you could engage with, whether it's going to see a movie or whether it's going to walk into to Apple and to buy something, right? And so how do we take friction out of the consumer journey and allow them to enjoy the ability to purchase something that they find interesting and want to purchase, while not completely disrupting them from leaving an immersive Instagram experience? And there is, again, this is a very small percentage of the ecosystem now. There's so much work that has to be done. The fact that it is only US only, there are only 20 some brands that are involved, but you can think longer term of how is that going to benefit every part of our ecosystem, whether it is the brands and the media partners who are creating merchandise that they know is resonant with the consumers, to the consumers themselves who want to feel like they aren't having to jump through hoops in order to convert. And so shrinking that conversion funnel, I think, is incredibly valuable across all sides of that ecosystem. And yeah, the upside's enormous. I would argue that shopping will be a pillar of the user experience, as we think 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. The question is, how do we do that in a really tasteful way? And honestly, from a partner perspective, how do partners create really rich and tasteful content experiences that are also shoppable, right? And so we have some great examples, even with our legacy product, of organizations that have really done what I would call content meets commerce. And the two examples that are so top of mind from a sports perspective are, one, an engagement that we did, IG Sports did with the NFL around the NFL draft, in creating a shopping activation with their new era hats that all of the draftees wear as they get drafted. They went off stage. They were in a beautiful immersive environment where they created content with us, and the NFL posted that content, and the user had the ability to buy that content through our legacy product. I mean, that was such a tasteful way to take a tentpole moment and make it shoppable. And then secondly, and there are any number of proof points, but what Bleacher Report is doing with content meets commerce, I think, is really innovative. And it's really content meets commerce meets culture, in their collaborations in hip hop and entertainment and fashion, as well as the things they did with Dwayne Wade earlier, I believe earlier this year. that's the stuff that people want to discover on Instagram and are going to lead to a purchase on our platform. And I think that's really where you're going to see a lot of the wins. And also, I would argue even a lot of the urgency around meeting a user in a moment that inspires them to want to purchase, right?
Yeah.
The same way that if I'm in a mall, I'm walking, perusing the aisle around, looking at something, and I'm inspired to make a purchase, and I can go make that purchase.
So a couple of things on that. Once you enter your credit card data, does it save it for all future purchases, I should say?
So, and I'll have to double check this, but I believe once you've entered payment information once, it should save. So you're doing that.
I'm telling you. Everybody spends so much time on Instagram. The second you get paid, your paycheck's gonna go down to zero. And then is the ultimate business model much like an Amazon or eBay? Instagram provides the platform, takes a small percentage of sales, and then you can use that as much as you would like as a brand.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to. Our model is very similar to other models that provide this kind of service in terms of the transaction fees that are involved. And again, we only have X number of partners who are doing this. The two that are most sports related are Nike and Adidas. But that model is not going to deviate from what our partners are used to seeing across every other platform. Ideally, we're able to provide a lot of meaningful scale and meeting the audience where they are. And so I think those are the two things that we're really keenly focused on, in addition to, I think, building an immersive experience where, as I mentioned, taking friction out of the user journey, the consumer journey. Are there other ways in which we can do that? And I think you'll see in the next few months, there are additional product features and tools that we're going to introduce that do an even better job of that. Similar to how IGTV started playing to its superpower around previews and feed, I think you're going to see shopping with more partners on board in the checkout. We're going to start introducing more superpowers there that enable a better experience across the board.
As somebody that has a little OCD and type A personality, I always freak out. Like the Bleacher Report moment that happened with Bleacher Report Live with Tiger versus Phil, when that moment happened, is the reason behind the beta test is to figure out just that. How much customer service support, how many engineers that you're going to need to really be able to help products and brands at scale, because you can't get to a point where people are going to put 90% of their ROI in Instagram during the holiday season and Instagram shop goes down for 24 hours. Like, I'm guessing that's why there's like a slow rollout to understand what type of infrastructure is needed to support it, right?
It's such a good question. And I see it on both sides of the coin. One being someone who represents partnerships in sports. I'd prefer fully baked products that serve every partner that we want to serve on our platform.
Yeah.
And inherently, we have constraints across a lot of our products, whether it's folks on IGTV who use third-party tools to upload content and get their data, to that as one example, to checkout being U.S.-based, the charity or donation sticker that we introduced last month being U.S.-based. So, in an ideal world, I think we'd release all these things that can benefit our entire user and partner base worldwide. The reality is, and this is personal observation experiences, do you need to develop enough proof points to make further investment in what you're doing from a product perspective? Also, to your point, how do you identify issues, bugs, things that aren't working or that are broken, so we can fix those before you scale them out to a broader set of users, and making sure that's really buttoned up. I think about, having worked at Google and YouTube for 6.5 years, that was my first foray into what a product-driven organization is like. And, how long was Gmail in beta? I mean,
Ryan, what's the famous line? Like, if you wait till it's perfect, it's too late. I mean, so you have to kind of throw it to the wolves and see.
Absolutely. And I think for us, and as a partnerships organization, not even just sports, but across all verticals, we are definitely, it is our responsibility to provide enough tangible, quantitative, qualitative feedback from our partners to product and engineering so that they know what the right things are to prioritize in this ecosystem. And so we have a very sort of strong tethered relationship in that they are serving us by developing great tools and great features. We have to do a job of serving them by providing them the right directional feedback so that this whole thing gets better.
I was thinking like one thing the Lakers did all season long was they would have LeBron and the whole crew getting off the plane and they're wearing their sunglasses and their Gucci bags. And that's an element too, right? Where I'm sure you're looking at it from the team and athlete standpoint where if the Lakers tag that Gucci bag and someone wants to be just like LeBron, because as you know, fanatics, I know when I was a kid, I wanted to do everything Kobe Bryant did or Michael Jordan did. So that's another layer that it's not necessarily the official Gucci handle, but can other brands start to be tagged by sports leagues and sports partners? And maybe there's a commission there or something like that too. So that there's a lot of possibilities.
I thought you were going to say the Lakers did a lot of not winning over the past season.
That is true. Thank you. See, that's because of the Brady Quinn comment. It all comes back to my Lakers.
Exactly. Got a lot more digs about SoCal sports teams, but I'll save them for the next podcast.
Yeah.
The use cases around shopping on our platform are numerous, and you hit one directly on the head of, and this, I'll sort of dub this as a superpower as well. How do you introduce the concept of creators, individuals, celebrities, athletes contributing to the shopping experience in two situations? One where, whether it's LeBron or whether it is Serena
Williams, Jenner,
brand, they have their own brand of which they want to transact with their consumers directly. But probably the far broader use case, which is I'm an athlete, I have a brand partnership with Gucci, to use your example. How do I help activate Gucci through my audience? And so we introduced, as part of the checkout rollout, we introduced a feature called Shopping from Creators. And we had a handful of creators and athletes, celebrities. I use creators sort of as a broad term, where our brand partners, the 20 plus who were involved in checkout, they selected a number of brand partners they were working with, individual partners they were working with, to essentially do what you just said, which is Juju Smith-Schuster in partnership with Adidas, post content on his handle to his audience. That product is tagged. His fans can go and click through that purchase process, not leaving Juju Smith-Schuster's content. They don't have to go to Adidas's channel or account. Adidas doesn't have to.
And that's why I feel like the game is, because so many fans of a Kylie Jenner, LeBron, a Juju Smith, they want to idolize or be like that person. So if they're walking down the red carpet and you can actually see that the earrings and the purse and the clutch or whatever, like I can just see, especially on the female demo side, like fashion is so huge and they follow so many fashion influencers that I feel like that might be 80% of the game alone, rather than the actual brand itself.
No, I think we have to build for both use cases. And I think what's a great benefit on the first use case is that these brands are starting to do such an amazing job of creating, in essence, shoppable / branded content. And they themselves have built up such substantial followings, either because they are transacting merch and they're releasing drops, et cetera, but they're also doing storytelling, right? And so I think that contributes to why they themselves are brands that go that far in terms of creating compelling content, but they have partners, whether it's the Juju Smiths or the Serena Williams or the Candace Parkers of the world, who are able to tell those stories for them, illustrate the use cases or the uses of said product, and really activate as spokespeople for those brands. And we want to make sure we're building for that use case in a big way because, again, many people on our platform are there to follow individuals. Many also come there to follow brands. But again, we know that individuals or that users like to follow, famous people, their favorite athletes, their favorite celebrities, and that they do have nuanced relationships with the brands they're in partnership.
I mean, it's funny. Even at 32 years old, we talked about the Lakers. They rolled out these new zip-up hoodies for warm-ups, and the black. And my producer Will here, he's a Laker fan too. But I really wanted the black zip-up hoodie, and I looked everywhere online for it. Nike sold out. I went to Team LA store at Staples Center; they're sold out. And long story short, I paid an exorbitant amount of money on eBay from some person that happened to have it. But it was like one of those things where I think I originally saw it more on Instagram. They kept on reminding me on Instagram more so than the actual game, because they would post these photos of the guys running out of the tunnel, and I'm like, I want that jacket, because I'm not a huge purple or gold fan of that color, but the black was on fire. Anyways, I could see that working at scale.
No, for sure, it could work at scale. And again, for those two use cases we just discussed, I mean, I think a couple of proof points to mention on this podcast. One is that the average sports fan, so that 320 million follower number, the average sports fan follows upwards of 8 athlete accounts. And so if you think about that, to your point, athletes are in partnership with brands. That's a great way to surface and transact with your fans. But the other use case, which is if not as important, is of high importance, and that is 80% of Instagram users follow a business on Instagram. And so how do you also build for that use case and allow us to take friction out of that process and make sure they have a really easy, positive shopping experience on our platform that still allows them to go consume the things and people they love once they've made that purchase.
That being said, with some of the partners, and I guess we can use the NFL as an example, how did you see it? The results, were you guys happy with it? The usability, the traffic that you got, did all that seem to exceed expectations? Like, how did you guys break down the results?
In terms of results, and without sharing any specific data, the NFL's feedback was extremely positive for a number of reasons. One, because it was really their first, I think, foray into creating shoppable content around such a big tentpole within their sport, which is the NFL draft, obviously. And the fact that they were able to lean into Instagram in such a meaningful way and provide content that was resonant to their fan base, you can think about the implications of what this means for the future of their business as it broadens from a new era cap that's built just for the draft to what happens when the Cleveland Browns release the Baker Mayfield jersey or the Odell Beckham jersey now for this year, and thinking about what those moments are and how to capitalize on those moments. I would venture to say that the NFL draft was safe in the regard that they had a great brand partner in New Era who creates for this event every year, and they've made a turn. I would say our partnership has evolved substantially over the past 4 to 6 months, where they have leaned in.
Shout out to Dave Feldman, right?
Absolutely, Dave. Who, unfortunately won't be at our panel anymore. Yeah. But they've leaned in a big way of understanding. Again, as Instagram has evolved and developed business tools to support their business objectives and their bottom line, really embracing that and taking, again, what was a substantial moment in the NFL calendar and seeing if we could develop proof points. And I think there was so much there to allude to the future opportunity. And I think that's what both parties are so excited about, in addition to the fact that at some point we'd love to get the NFL involved in the litany of tools we're building for
every photo they post also, I don't know if this is possible and you guys have talked about this, but every photo on @NFL for the whole season that features a player, there could be a tag to buy that jersey. I mean, it's just like, it's a pretty cool opportunity. I think that can almost be part of their strategy on not only tentpole events, but potentially every piece of content. The same way you tag or hashtag, you're doing that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking in theory for those of us, I mean, you mentioned the Lakers, but for me, I'm a Washington Redskins fan. Think about me following the Washington Redskins, and I get to see the drop of the Dwayne Haskins jersey as they post a picture of him in whatever jersey number he picked. I can't remember what it was. Being able to do that as well. There are some nuances in terms of shopping within the sports ecosystem that we're attempting to address to take some friction out of that process. Obviously, there are a lot of league deals that have been done, and we want to make sure we're being really mindful of not just the value to the consumer, but also the economics behind shopping for our partners, and making sure that we're really delivering a ton of business value there as they are investing more resources in shoppable content. So a lot of work to be done, but I'm fortunate that I've got a great team at Instagram Sports, and really Will Yoder, and shout out to Will, who has been leading the charge, especially with our leagues around what shopping on Instagram can and should look like. And our team's done a great job of really sizing and describing the opportunity within sports, specifically within Instagram, because it's not just about fashion, it's not just about beauty, it's not just about entertainment. Sports represents such an opportunity, and we've been able to really make a lot of inroads with product to start developing around that vertical and really invest in unlocking that ecosystem at scale.
So I know we got to wrap up here soon, but I wanted to get your thought. What are the key tenets or the things that you focus on when you're talking to teams, your partners, your athletes about Instagram as a platform? What's kind of the main things that you make sure they walk away from that conversation in order to utilize the platform as efficient and as as good as possible?
Yeah, I feel like there are a number of social media playbooks that say a lot of the same things, and I'm sure you remember from our days when I was at YouTube and you were
Yeah,
at STN and
yeah.
you were on camera in a very
Also,
different way
Max
back then.
Kellerman, yeah.
Exactly, and some of that hasn't changed, right? I think it's all about playing to the strengths of why you're on digital and social to begin with. How do you speak authentically to your fans? How do you speak credibly? How do you take advantage of the different services in which you can engage? And for Instagram specifically, it's around IGTV, it's around stories, it's around feed, and understanding the value of each surface and what can you create and where should that content exist.
For athletes, Q&A and stories, all those different features you can use. Yeah.
So the interactivity piece, I can't overstate its importance and value, because if there's one thing that I've preached from the rafters constantly, and that is, if you're not using, let's take Instagram out of it. Let's just say if you're not using social for two-way conversation, communication, engagement, then why are you on that platform to begin with?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
the main difference. That is one of the main differentiators and value adds of being on these platforms. It's why I would argue that all of our partners should be in some way, shape, or form figuring out how to incorporate fans in their programming. It's why you've got Twitch developing a ton of features that allow fans to sort of curate their own content experience around NFL streams. And again, you
Yeah.
look at the stories and the interactivity there. I think there is just a lot of value to be gained in engaging. And one example I think of is, I'm a baseball fan, and say what you want about your favorite sports accounts. I actually really enjoy the fact that the MLB has done a really creative job of engaging their audience in a couple of ways. One, they actually respond to fan comments, which it's not easy to do that in a really authentic and effective way.
Yeah.
But they've really leaned into doing that, and I think they've seen the fruits of that in terms of fans engaging the content, players engaging the MLB account, which I think is super interesting. But then if you look at what they did this past weekend, the Yankees and the Red Sox had their series this weekend, and they used the quiz sticker and they built a quiz around the history of that storied rivalry. It was really compelling. And ultimately, what does that do? That probably serves their media partner in ESPN and driving to tune in for Sunday night when the Yankees play
100%.
the Red Sox, right?
Yeah. In a very organic, genuine way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so just the same principles apply that applied 6 years ago when I was at YouTube. It's just, how do you do it across Instagram services, and how do you make sure that your fans are being heard? And my personal example, and I'll give him a shout out, even though he hated on VCU, which is one of my favorite basketball teams. But Jay Billis is one of my favorite college basketball personalities. And
he's great on social.
He's absolutely great.
Yeah.
I love his Young Jeezy quotes that he posts every morning. But what do you do if you're a fan on? I'll use Twitter as that example. What would you do if Jay Billis responded to one of your comments, which he has done for me in the past?
Yeah.
Me, as when I was and still am a nobody in sports, he responded to a comment. What is the first thing I do? I share that content with all my friends and family.
Yeah.
I like it. I retweet it, and then you know what I do? I consume every other piece of content that guy's going to post. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so while that's hard to figure out how to do it in a scalable way, if you can crack that nut and do that really effectively and authentically, then you build fans for life, right?
Well, that's funny you said that, because I think anybody that's listening to this episode right now, go back and listen to TJ Adosala over at Twitter as well, because very similar statement you just made, and also, as growing up as sports fans, Dave, you and I, like, we weren't able to go out and touch Michael Jordan. We weren't able to, tweet or reply or comment on Kobe Bryant stuff, at least early on in his career. And I mean, if Michael Jordan retweeted something, I mean, it's just like, I used to write notes to him and the whole deal, but like that it would have made your decade. I mean, so I can only imagine you forget that as we get older, but if you're a 9-year-old kid that's obsessed with Giannis or LeBron or whoever, I mean, just by hitting that heart button on Instagram on a comment can just make that kid's be your loyal fan for life.
Oh, absolutely. And what you find too is athletes, I think even more so now than years ago, are so deeply engaged with their fan base. I mean, look what Steph Curry did with that young girl who wrote that, her shoe size wasn't available for his last sneaker drop, right? I mean, that's where, you really see that impact, and you really see the ability for fans to engage in a deep way. And shout out to TJ and the team at Twitter, because they're fantastic. And my team has had the pleasure of working with those folks closely as well.
Cool. You guys don't hate each other. You're not rivals. I like it. Very positive.
As I mentioned, I gain utility on a personal level from all these platforms,
for sure.
And they're able to serve partners in unique ways, the same way Instagram is. And coincidentally, I think 80% of the Instagram sports and Twitter sports employee population are from the DC area. So TJ and I are from the same area, which is funny. Kind of funny.
TJ's a great guy. And I think, Dave Feldman actually told me something recently, which I thought was really good. Instagram's not really competing with Twitter. The NFL's not really competing with the NBA. We're all competing for attention. And your standpoint too, like, users on your platform and staying on platform, but it's not really like us versus Twitter, or like you said, NFL versus NBA. It really is every brand, every network, everybody out there is competing for people's eyeballs and attention.
I agree. And also, when you think about the fact that there are different audiences on these platforms, the fans don't necessarily exist in one place or spending all their time in one place. I look at House of Highlights. This will be, I guess, my last comment here. But, when House of Highlights announced their deals with Snapchat and with Twitter, my first thought wasn't, why isn't House of Highlights doing original content on Instagram? My thought was, when are they going to get their content in a great place where they are going to view Instagram as great distribution for their premium original content? And that's where all these things sort of work in tandem with one another. And, the models continue to evolve and devolve, like I said, but if these platforms provide a value to fans and to our partners, that's overall a good thing. And as someone who's spent the last 5.5, 6 years on the media side of the aisle, it's hard out there, and they have to make real serious considerations about where they spend their time and resources. And as somebody who works at Instagram, I just want to make sure that the time they spend programming to their audience on Instagram is fruitful. And if I can support their needs and challenges and opportunities, that's part of my charter. So
one quick thing for you is with ESPN Plus and Bleacher Report Live, I see a vision in the future where in stream on Instagram, you will see a live preview with a button that allows you to watch the full game for 99 cents. And the NBA is experimenting with this. Are those things internally and with partners you're kind of talking out as possibilities for, again, if you're talking about keeping people in platform and user-friendly for partners, that sounds like a potential next step for sports.
It's a great question. We had a great meeting with the NBA sort of in the fall of last year around that product, which I think is an amazing product. And the short-term use case is, how do you use Instagram to drive urgency around what's happening with your premium product that may live elsewhere? And I think we'll start to see more and more of our media partners and league partners lean into that as they figure out the economics behind their models and sort of how that serves each other. As a product feature, I could see that being something that's compelling. I think the question is, where does that rank in the list of prioritization for tools that serve not just sports, but all the verticals that fall under Instagram partnerships? And that's just,
that's true.
That's just a drum that I have to beat internally and the value of that, because to your point, that may serve substantial business value to sports. It's just, how do I help scale that impact to positively affect the numerous partners across the numerous verticals.
All right, I'm making this statement now. This is part one. We got a whole other part two we can get into, so we'll have you on here shortly. Listen, our audience and everybody that's been on this podcast, obsessed with Instagram, obsessed with getting granular about it. So there's so much more detail I'm sure we can go into that can help a lot of people out there. So that was extremely helpful. I always ask this at the end of the show, Dave. If you could recommend anybody, I know you know a lot of good people. Anybody in your network that you can recommend that would provide value to the listener and be a good guest on the pod? Anybody come to mind?
Oh man,
and I don't want to talk to Bradley Beal, so you can, unless he's coming to the Lakers.
So I mean, I don't know about athletes. I guess if we're talking industry folks, oh man, there's so many I could think of, honestly, and I've had the pleasure of introducing you to Brendan, who straddles a number of different verticals at Jukin Media. But I actually find the topic of UGC to be fascinating, as I was talking to one of your colleagues prior to this podcast around potential topics and sort of future bets. I am particularly fascinated by where UGC goes and really how that actually ends up serving the users in terms of, can you like monetize microtransactions? Like Jukin gets a little bit of I don't say a bad rap. People always question what their business is and what they're doing, but in essence, they're serving users who otherwise would have no idea how to make money off of the content that they're creating, right? And so, I think he would be interesting. I'm going to give a shout out to Armand, who's the director of social at Complex, because he's actually a sports guy who came from Bleacher, worked at, I believe, Cycle, and now he's overseeing Complex, the flagship brand. But Complex has pursuits in sports lifestyle. I think he's a really interesting one who's having to almost answer the questions that you brought up around how do you negotiate the world of social and digital and make decisions around a brand with finite resources, right? I think he would be interesting. I would obviously plug my colleagues on Instagram Sports if you ever wanted more Instagram representation. And then Amal, who is the new head of sports at Snapchat. He and I haven't had a chance to meet in person yet, but we will do shortly. And I believe he was announced as the new head of sports at Snapchat less than a month ago. And he might be an interesting person to gain a POV around what Snapchat is doing in sports that's both unique to them, but that also is impactful to our partners across the industry.
Love it, man. Well, amazing stuff. Hold all those thoughts for 48 hours from now, I think. We'll break it all down once again. But always a pleasure, man. I really appreciate everything you've done for me so far in my career and the friendship we've created, too. So thanks so much for the time, man.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to seeing you in T-minus 48 hours there.
All right, Dave. Thanks so much, man.
All right, take it easy.
Later. All right, there he is, Dave Sethi. We're going to need a part two. I feel like we just did a little off-air discussion for about another 20 minutes, but so many questions and that I have that I think will provide a lot of value for you guys, but also I just geek out over this stuff, as I always say. So I'm asking him all this questions. I was asking him a little bit about the potential of removing likes on Instagram, which I know influencers are freaking out about, and how the Houston Rockets were banned on Twitter and what would happen in an Instagram environment from a copyright standpoint, as right now social media is such the wild, wild west, right? When you look at parody content and you look at pop culture stuff that's being released, especially in the sports scene, what happens if some type of cease and desist comes down from a major network, which hasn't really happened to date yet. Anyways, we talked a little bit offline, and on a part two, we'll get into all that and more. But some good stuff, Will. What you any notes that you had, any takeaways from your standpoint?
Yeah, a lot of takeaways. I actually really like the point about Instagram being so popular just because it's user-friendly, and you don't think about that, but everyone's parent is on Instagram, and that really tells you.
The user-friendly aspect Will's talking about, I totally agree. It's like, how can we make this a platform that people spend hours a day? And I didn't tell him this, but there's been moments where I've thrown my phone across the living room because Instagram has this addictive nature to it with the infinite scroll, where it's just something that anytime you have a free moment, you open up your phone, you click that Instagram app, and you are engulfed and kind of immersed in that experience. And it comes so much, Will, to your point about the usability and the user-friendliness of the platform, which it sounds like is first and foremost to them. And I get it. Like, from a 16:9 standpoint, I was kind of making fun of Dave during the program. But, a lot of their partners are like, listen, we have limited resources and we don't have 2.5 hours every week to, reformat all of our content, or even more, a lot more probably, in a vertical environment. So please, can you help us out a little bit? So I totally get it from a macro standpoint. But I like the different silos that he really looks at, as well as the advocate internally at Facebook Inc. for sports on Instagram, the strategist to help teams in sports leagues, and then just being able to shout out, all the cool things they're doing, like shopping, which again, I talked about a lot during the podcast. So that's a game changer, man, for e-commerce. Is it as big as Amazon? Not quite, but I mean, since Amazon, I don't know if we've seen something that could be so disruptive in the e-commerce space, especially the fashion space. I think there's so much opportunity there. And we really got into it, which I think the athlete, right, the influencer, the actress, the person on the red carpet that is followed, and the fanatics that follow these individuals, that's where I really think some merchandise can be moved in a really big way. Because, again, you see LeBron or Westbrook or whatever, and you're wondering what they're wearing, and it's hard for you to even see what they are wearing or how to buy it or what, how much it costs. And once that stuff becomes user-friendly and clickable, it's going to be great. All right, episode number 38. Thanks so much to Dylan, Will, and Dave Furker, as always. Episode 38, the Kurt Schilling Podcast. This is the business of social, every single week, breaking it down for you. The ever-changing digital, social, marketing landscape. My name is David Brickley. This has been another edition of the Business of Social, powered by STN Digital.